Hey, welcome to another episode of Roll or Die. We have had this gentleman on previously. He shared the space with his mate Peter Florinini, but he was, I wouldn't say overshadowed, but we wanted to give him a full focus, give him the opportunity to have the limelight all to himself.
Yeah.
He is one of my longest friends in Jiu-Jitsu. We came together from Peter to Bean across to Absolute. He's a black belt. Can I say that you're in your 60s?
Yeah, definitely.
Am I allowed to say that? Yep. And he is nearly finished a PhD in behavioural science. So we want to explore that side of his brain today, if we can. Welcome, Conor. Conor Wynn.
Thank you. It's hard to be in the shadow of Peter Florinini. He's got a great backstory. He's unbelievable. If half the things he says are true, he's a dangerous man.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a legend. But you're right. Riding shotgun with him is not an easy task either. He's a loose cannon, that man.
He is. Yeah. Just as well. He's nearly 80.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right. He's like 70s. Yeah.
He's
so
78.
I actually I realized we've previously a couple of previous episodes we had John Will and Peter DeBean, and now yourself. So I think our last three guests have been in their 60s.
Yeah.
Masters
forever.
That's right. Yeah, I think Peter's our Goggins. He's the nearest thing we got to Goggins in the Southern Hemisphere.
Right? Yeah, you know David Goggins, Anton?
No.
Oh, David Goggins. Oh.
Goggins. Tell me, enlighten me. And should we get him on the show?
I don't know that we could get him on. He's he's next level. He's an ex Navy SEAL who he was a big fat guy who I think kind of gave up on life, and then I don't even know what happened. Do you know, Conor, that made it change him to the switch, and he's now like an absolute beast. I mean, he's like a motivational speaker, and he's written books. He goes around the world like motivating people.
Yeah, he's a really interesting dude because he had a terrible upbringing. His dad was quite abusive to his mother, and his mother had to kind of run away in the middle of the night, and he suffered badly because of that, and he had low self-esteem, and he was kind of lost. And as Kimmy says, he got up to about 350 or 400 pounds, and then decided to take things in hand and sort himself out.
Right.
And now he's an absolute beast. He's really good.
Inspiration stuff. Well, I guess that kind of leads into maybe the first question, which would be like, for you, who inspired you into jiu-jitsu in the first place? We always love to find out.
Oh, okay.
And were they a Goggins type person for you?
Yeah. It was Peter DeBean, and he was a brown belt at the time. He'd just come third, I think, at the Pan Pacs in Hawaii. I was on holiday. I was living in Malaysia at the time, and I was on holiday down in Torquay. I thought I'll do a bit of surfing. I can't surf, but I like being in the water. And we were just walking around the shopping plaza in Torquay, and there was this little ad for Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and I'd seen Hickson Gracie was on the cover of Yoga magazine because I was quite into yoga at the time, and I thought, oh yeah, there's this Gracie thing, and this bloke seems to have something to do with this Gracie, and so I called him up and joined up, and I used to travel from Melbourne down to Torquay a couple of times a week. Just to train. Nearly got myself sacked in the process because I was trying to sneak out the back door about 4:30, and trying to duck and dive onto the boss. But yeah, I went down there and just never looked. My first role was with Dan Cherubin. The guy who went on to be Dan Cherubin, he was like a 13-year-old at the time, and he was about 55 kilos, and Pete said to me, I said, just have a roll with this guy. I said, come on, Pete, that's not fair. I'll kill him. And he said, no, I think he'd be all right. And I said, really? I said, so I thought to myself, I'll just go easy on him because, I was in my late 30s, I think late 30s, yeah. And he must have been 13 years old or something, and he was like 45 kilos or 50 kilos. And like 10 seconds later, he was on my back, and I was bloody well, get this. I couldn't get this. And then he choked me out, and I went, "That's it, right? That's it. I'm going now. No more, Mr. Nice Guy." And I went at him, and like he choked me out even quicker. And he was a skinny little, like, let's say 45 kilo guy. And I went, okay, this is it. I've got to know how to do this, because this young teenager has just humiliated me. And then I went in just one more time, and I really gave it everything I could. And I think he played at me for about 5 minutes, and I was completely exhausted at the end of it. Like I did about 10 minutes rolling, and I was absolutely buggered for a couple of days.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was it. I thought, that's it. I found it. This is what I need.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Well, that's a pretty famous name there that you had, at least for your first role. A lot of people give the story about, some small kid beating them up, or a small female or whatever. So I suppose you've got the accolade, at least, of it being someone that was very, very highly esteemed.
Yeah, well, even those days, going down to Torquay, it was a bit like sitting on a lineup for a wave. It was a very chill atmosphere. There was maybe a dozen guys on the mats, and they would have a bit of a yarn, and then there was no formal start or end. And then Cherubin would just go, "Oh, here's some stuff I've been working on," and people would just kind of huddle around it, and we just noodle stuff out. And I loved the whole unstructured nature of it, and and the fact that it was small and kind of quirky and interesting. I thought, great, because nobody knew what Brazilian Jiu Jitsu was. I used to say, if they said, do you do a sport? And I go, "Oh, yeah, I do." And they go, "What do you do?" And I used to say judo, and they go, "Okay, fine." Once or twice I said Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and they go, "What?" It's like, what's that? Do you have to get shaved up for that? I think that sounds
Yeah. Yeah, so that would have been in the 90s, yeah. So you've been around a long time.
Yeah. Still stuck at it. Still.
I wouldn't say that as a black belt. I wouldn't say.
Oh yeah, no. As I said when I got my black belt, I think what Lucky did in one fell swoop was manage to raise the level of brown belts and lower the level of black belts.
I love your attitude, man. I think I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to follow in your footsteps, Conor. That's what I'm going to do.
Because if you look at the lineup of black belts before me, you get Kit, you've got Lucky, you got Ben Hodge. I'm probably going to insult people by forgetting who they are. Craig. I mean, I shouldn't be in the same line as them. I shouldn't be. But it is what it is. So
of course you should. I mean, Anton has had this conversation with me, and you may have heard of it too. That there's that theory about, like, with every belt. No, well, yeah, there's that. But the belt being like with the age. So when you're, how does that work, Anton? What was that for every belt? It's 10 years, or
let's say, well, you're a black belt, right? So for every 10 years gap between you and someone else, like if they're 10 years older, that's the equivalent of you being a whole belt higher. If they're 10 years younger, then...
Not many people are 10 years older on the mats, though.
No.
It's true. So for everyone 10 years younger, So let's say that if you're rolling with someone 10 years younger, then a brown belt is equivalent to a black belt for you, according to the couple of the Gracies I saw on a YouTube clip.
Yeah, Henner and Huron talked about the Boyd belt system, because they had a black belt called Boyd.
That was those two. The Boyd belt system. Thank you, brother.
That's right. Yeah, and I thought, that's for me. I'm having that. That'll go.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons I went to the Worlds, because when I was training in Pete's or competing, I was forever losing, or maybe getting second or something. Second in like a three man competition. People go, "Oh yeah, mate, you did well. They're 20 years younger than you, or they're 10 kilos heavier." And I was just, because in the VIX. Like I would often end up fighting adult, but I was sick of hearing it. I was going, I'm tired of this bullshit. People are just being too polite.
Yeah.
I really stuck at this thing. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll go to the Worlds, and I'll be able to compete with people my age, my weight, my belt, and I'll figure out whether I am any good at this or not, or whether people are just blowing smoke up my arse. And turned out I did okay. I had a bit of luck on the day.
Did better than okay. You won.
Yeah, I did.
you became a world champion, so no need to be so humble.
It is masters though, and to put that in context, I came back with my gold medal in my bag and had my arse handed to me by a blue belt. You know. Yeah. So, do you remember Ryan Ford?
Yes. Little Ryan. Yeah.
A little like 60-kilo bloody Tasmanian devil type guy, just completely demolish it. And he was going, oh yeah, good, congrats mate, you know, he did really well, can we have a roll? Yeah, sure, no problem. And he smashed this shit at it.
But he was also 25 and training multiple times a day.
He's training 20 times a week or something.
Yeah.
There's so many paths that we could go down with this, right? But I guess hearing that you've been studying behavioral science, is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So what are you discovering through that can either benefit BJJ or benefit people in our position? Like I grew up, just quickly example, Cooper Burnham was a 10-year-old who I used to play with like a mouse and like love this kid through his jiu-jitsu journey and just like be really gentle with him. And then now he's only like 20 or something and destroys me every time we roll. So I've had this person coming up underneath me and then destroying me. And like it's fair enough. Like I have no problem with it. But there's two angles where this behavioral science could be relevant. One of them is just in general, and the other one is as people around you are kind of going faster than you, or like what are you discovering? Yeah,
well, one of the things that I discovered was when I went back to compete, because I'd set a target of going to the Worlds. So I thought, well, there's no point of me just rocking up to the Worlds and not having competed in like 5 years, because I hadn't. Life, family, kids, jobs. I just kind of jiu-jitsu had been a really important hobby, but just a hobby. And I thought I need to dial it up a bit and do some competing. And I remember my first return to the mats, in the comp mats in the VIX after about 5 years. I was hyperventilating on the side of the mat. I literally was. I could barely see the guy in front of me. I was that stressed. And it was over in about 30 seconds because I just hadn't a clue what was going on.
Yeah.
So for the first time in like previously, I hadn't had much performance anxiety other than just the usual nerves. It's a different event, but I was fine. But something had happened in the kind of intervening period. Other things became more important, or the gap between me and the other competitors was bigger, that I just had serious performance anxiety.
Yeah.
So two things worked for me. One was this is something that I feel I need to overcome. So overcoming performance anxiety became a thing in itself, as opposed to something I needed to brush to one side. It became a real objective. I need to. This is something important. Just dealing with that on its own, regardless of how I went at a competition, was something that I wanted to achieve. So what I wanted to do, when I stood on the mats at Worlds, was to feel that I'd had everything in place. I trained as hard as I could be. My mindset was right. My nutrition was right, and I was more or less injury free. I did everything except be injury free because I'd overtrained. But other than that, I felt really good. It was the Walter Pyramid, and the feeling I had on the day was like I'm on the same mats as like Rafael Mendes, and I thought, oh my God, I'm on that stage. It felt really just awesome, just like to be on the stage, which was different to me being in the VIX, where I felt absolutely shitty. I was like everybody was looking at me. I'm gonna fuck up. So I had a completely different mindset going in. And to cut to the chase, one of the, and there's more psychology than behavioral science. So disclaimer: I'm not a psychologist. I'm not providing advice. This is just for entertainment only. This is a personal opinion. So one of the well-known approaches to dealing with issues like this is exposure therapy. which is basically you got to expose yourself to it more and more and more. And that's what I did. Like I used to compete in every bloody round robin I could get my hands on.
Yeah.
And the whole point, that the purpose of the competition was just to get exposure to having a crowd around me, to having somebody else going flat stick, just to get into the groove. And I competed like even back then, which is probably 7 years ago. There's a competition nearly every weekend. So I just rock up. If there was no masters, no worries. I wasn't there to collect a medal. I was there to
expose yourself.
Just to callous it. Well, Goggins would say he'd call it callousing the mind. But you're just building up an extra layer of skin over that, where you don't feel it's you're not as sensitive. Now you had a couple of other guys on so I think you had Jorn Tang on, who I know of. He's in Melbourne. He talked about some of the stuff around which is a version of exposure therapy, and I think you had Chris Shen also talking about some techniques. But basically, the one of the issues, what you're trying to do is deal with what's called neuroticism. I said neuroticism, Anton, not eroticism. His eyes lit up.
First of all, we hear that you just want to rock up to events to expose yourself, and now you're talking about...
Okay, now it's eroticism. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You heard it here first, folks. If you see Conor...
So to answer your question after a kind of long wind up, I mean, everybody suffers from, to an extent, performance anxiety, but some people suffer more than others.
Yeah.
So everybody's different. So your two previous contributors had general advice that would apply to everybody. The thing I wanted to talk about today is primarily that what makes some people different to others, and why are some people more susceptible to performance anxiety than others. Yeah. I mean, the solution is pretty well worn, which is exposure therapy. That's a really good thing. And then I think Chris had talked about some exercises which effectively get you to concentrate on what's happening in your body as opposed to what's out there.
Nice.
But to talk about, so everybody's personality differs, and you can get a handle on it by understanding your personality. And there's lots of free resources out there that you can use. So the gold standard for personality assessment is called the 5-factor model, which is known by the acronym OCEAN, OCEAN: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Yeah. So everybody differs on those 5 dimensions. So openness is comprised of things like you like new ideas, creativity, you like to abstract, to be theoretical. And so, for instance, if you look at Absolutes and Killed It, a lot of open people who are just nerds, if you like, looking for the latest little thing.
Concepts and experiment and
yeah, and there's also an appreciation of beauty and form, as opposed to, say, just a kind of pohada approach to life. So that's and having come from the Beans, where there's plenty of pohada, that was a really nice change, and nothing wrong with pohada at all. But it's as you get older, it's nice to be beaten precisely rather than smashed into smithereens. So that's openness. Conscientiousness is so Kim would be the gold standard for conscientiousness, I reckon. So that's comprised of just working hard and also being organized and diligent and everything sorted out. But one of the killer traits to have is conscientiousness. Like if you work hard, you'll eventually get there on pretty much anything you set your mind to. Pretty much. So conscientiousness is a big marker for success in most aspects of life. Extroversion, which is probably more your bag, Anton, which is being gregarious and being friendly and being open. That's
I'm the opposite to all of those things.
Yeah, Yep. And there's another type of C word that describes me. So yeah.
So extroversion is a scale, right? At one end you got severe introvert, and at the opposite end you got extroverts. So and I can tie this to combat sports. Extroversion and introversion doesn't seem to have much impact in terms of top players. That doesn't seem to be associated with it. I mean, in St Kilda, there's plenty of introverts. So it's one of there is an interesting part of extroversion, which is about liking to be in charge, and that could certainly translate to some jiu-jitsu. Extroversion, agreeableness, which is the A. Look, that's being compassionate. Kimmy's a very agreeable person. She's always reaching out, saying how are things, how's it going, how's the COVID. That's a super trait to have. Doesn't translate to much on the mats, but outside of the mats, it's an awesome feature to have. And then
it can be a little bit negative sometimes too, though. Yeah, it can be too agreeable, become a bit of a walkover, or no?
Yeah, you can. So I can talk about a different model. So just to put it in context, so personality doesn't explain everything about how you behave. It's only about a third of your behavior. So we all behave differently in different situations. So behave differently at home to how we behave in the locker room to how we behave in the pub. So what's called the situation or context changes things. So you can be agreeable in the office and disagreeable at home because you tell the kids to just. I mean, your underlying personality is the same, but you can act differently. So
different hats.
Yeah. And then there's neuroticism, which is susceptibility to negative emotion.
Guys, bear with me 1 second. Ben, come here. Welcome to our podcast. This is Ben. He's from France. He's a brown belt, 3 stripes. Where are you from?
Hello. Bonjour, ça va?
Paris, France. There you go. This is Connor, and this is Kim. Kim's a black belt. Connor's a black belt.
Nice to meet you guys. We're gonna roll.
Nice to meet you too.
Very jealous.
I want to see. There we go.
Wow.
I'm from Thailand, Phuket. Do continue.
So gregariousness is part of extroversion. So that's what that was.
There we go. Yes.
So if you look at the studies on who does well in sports, the two big traits that people talk about are being low in neuroticism, which is low in negative emotion, and high in conscientiousness. So if you're not prepared to grind it out, which is conscientiousness, you're not going to get there. And if you're high in neuroticism, it's going to be very difficult. Not impossible, but very difficult.
Any tips or tricks to lower that level of neuroticism?
Yeah. So ultimately, so brains are plastic. You can, but brains are a bit. Think about it as being dealt a deck of cards when you're born, and then as you go through several rounds, you get different cards. So you can eventually change things, but you don't start as a blank slate. You'll know from your kids, Kimmy, that even with the same environment, you've got kids who behave totally differently. So you can not so much change your personality, but kind of broaden some of the responses that you might be capable of. So neuroticism is the way neuroticism works is it you compare what you expect to happen with what's actually happening, and you're looking at the difference between the two, and you say, am I happy with that difference? So if you take a personal example back to the VIX, I hadn't been on the mat in competition mat in 5 years, and in a situation you get bombarded with thousands of what's called behavioral cues, all this noise, all the lights, all the information, the bloody the referee, your mates on the side shouting for you. It's just like, and it's really, really difficult to process all of that in real time. It's very, very difficult. Because what you need to do is to turn down that neuroticism is basically to be able to ignore all of that. And there are some mental tricks and techniques that Chris talked about and Jordan talked about, but basically you want to expose yourself to a lot of it so that it just becomes in the background. that it doesn't even come in the foreground.
Just
a little bit more theory. Basically, there's two ways in which we think. One is fast and easy. Another way is slow and deliberate. And the slow and deliberate is if you're looking at a spreadsheet, you're trying to figure out the tax rates or how come your wages aren't quite right this month or something. That's slow and deliberate. The fast one is if you're in a car. You maneuver indicate that they are different processes. And most of the time, what you want the slow part to be pretty much in idle, because you haven't got that much, personally speaking as well, you haven't got that much bandwidth to do the slow deliberate stuff. So if in a competition situation, all that stuff is trying to be processed by the slow part of your brain, which wants to figure it all out and put it, it's just not going to work. It's just like trying to drink from a fire hose. There's just too much information coming through that you're trying to figure out. So what you want to do is try to push a lot of the stuff into the fast, almost subconscious habit part of your information processing. And that's why things like exposure therapy work, because you just go, they just don't become big issues anymore.
Yeah, I also read an article not that long ago. I can't remember where, or maybe it was in a book, but I was talking about how human beings were designed to pick up sounds or like triggers of danger like so quickly and respond. Like you can be camping and can be all sorts of normal noises like birds squawking or whatever. But if you hear a crunching in the bushes, your attention's fully over there with that. And I think it's like the same kind of situation. It's like part of that exposure therapy stuff you're talking about. Like if this is all so overwhelming and daunting, it's like a danger sign. But if you can get into those sounds, then all of a sudden you can just be present to the sounds and things which are a real threat, which is probably just your opponent on the mats and nothing else.
Well, to add to both of those. So like our subconscious has been developed over millions of years, and people think of gut reaction as being poor and bad. I think that's a bit unfair. I mean, your subconscious handles so many things. It keeps your heart going, keeps your breathing going, keeps you looking in that direction. It ignores some sounds and picks up on other. It's a lot of that stuff, and that's very, very difficult to stop because it's built up over like hundreds of thousands of years. And what you want to be able to do in a competition situation is to have a lot of what's happening handled by almost by your subconscious. That's because there's a filter around. So what do I need to pay attention to and what do I ignore? So you want to be able to pick out of all the signals coming in which bits to ignore, and to have that happen in real time for you as a skill. So competition I think should also include the mental aspect, which is being able to ignore a lot of those external stimuli, and as I think as Andreas Bronowski was saying, just make it another day in the office. You just go, don't need to worry about all those 95 things. Here's the 5 things I need to worry about. Another thing too, to answer your question specifically, Kimmy. So one of the things that helped me was having a game plan for the first like move or two, and just to focus on technique. Because if you focus on technique, you're not even worried about the guy. He's just a suit. So if your game plan is, I'm going to play top game, so therefore I want to do a takedown. Is it going to be a double leg or a single leg? You've got, and you can visualize that as your opening move. I mean, once it goes beyond the opening move, it's way too complicated. You can't predict it, but you can mentally rehearse and you can physically rehearse the opening move. So for instance, I like to play guard, so I would rehearse guard pulling. So in your training, just drill your opening move and also visualize it as well. So because then when you're in the role, the anxiety will disappear.
I actually wanted to ask a question about anxiety, just changing tacks a little bit. And you made the disclaimer about not being a qualified psychologist, but would you have any advice for people with COVID and returning to the mats? It seems like there's quite a lot of anxiety around jiu-jitsu people returning. Some people are not returning. They're feeling anxious. Obviously, there's the pandemic going on at the moment. But what would you say to that with people who've maybe been off the mats for 6 months, haven't trained much? Any advice?
Yeah. So I certainly don't want to give any advice to people to turn up to the mats and then they tell me if they've got COVID because of what I've said.
You should be a politician, Conor. Come on.
Well, you do have an audience, so
I like to think we do.
On the odd thought that somebody's listening.
We have stickers now too. I'll have to get you a sticker, Conor. We have merchandise as well for our guests.
Yeah. You got merch.
Happening. T-shirts to come.
Yeah. So I think it's as we get used to living with COVID, people will be a bit more relaxed, because one of the things that COVID has done is bring back into that slow thinking part of our brain all stuff that we used to ignore.
Yeah.
We used to assume you could get up in the morning and go out and have a coffee. That was just like, what do you mean I can't do that? And when that happened, what do you mean there aren't enough there isn't enough toilet paper on the shelves? How does that work? So the problem is you get anxiety. I think is another word for complexity. All of a sudden, life that was maybe not pleasant, but at least fairly simple and predictable becomes unpredictable. It's way more complicated. So for people who are feeling anxious, it'll be about complexity, and when they feel that the complexity is at the point where they can deal with it again, then they'll probably return to the mat.
I would leading on from, so it sounds like exposure therapy again, basically, like exposing yourself back to a new way of being until it blends into the background, and then you can focus on what it is that you are,
Yeah, well, I don't mean so much exposure therapy. So for instance, say you have kids who are going to school, and you've been homeschooling for a while because of COVID. When the kids can start going to school, and when the coffee shops start serving, you can sit down in a coffee shop. I mean, just other cues as opposed to exposure therapy. If you can say, okay, I can now forget about schooling for kids. That's a part of my brain I don't need to worry about.
Okay.
I can now forget about,
when the bandwidth gets freed up.
Exactly. Yeah. When all that stuff that you have to think about and worry about and figure out goes away and you can ignore, I think people will have a more capacity to go, maybe I should go back and have a roll.
Yeah. That's good. One of the things which I noticed about myself competing is, or just anything, public speaking, you name it, right? Sometimes I'm like overconfident and I'm zero nerves and I'm just ready for action. And then there can be seemingly nothing different. I can show up in an identical environment and be back to that, how you described your nerves when you competed at the VIX and you couldn't, it was over in 30 seconds because you were a mess. I can be that. I'm very capable of being that in almost every setting. So my question is, do you have, or have you studied, or do you have any theories on why things can, it sounds like a context kind of related question again, but why things can be fine and then all of a sudden they're not fine, and what do we do in those situations?
Yeah, well, what you're talking about there is volatility, which is a feature of an aspect of neuroticism.
Okay.
So that's part of your makeup, and I think it's worth accepting that's the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
To deal with that, one of the things you could think about again is not necessarily. I could imagine you being able to wing it pretty well in a lot of situations, but some situations where that would fall away from you. So again, you might want to rehearse the first couple of the first 30 seconds or a minute of your opening pitch or whatever it is, and then have some dot points sitting in a card in your pocket so that you go, okay. So the first part becomes completely automatic. And we know when like if you do it in the odd occasion where you hit your favorite technique, it's completely automatic, and it's just the most amazing thing. And you go, oh, shit, that just worked. How did I end up here?
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of chess lately, and what I have noticed, and it speaks to what you're saying, is like I've really studied one opening for offense and one opening for defense, or maybe a secondary. But all my chess matches start exactly the same way, and my performance is really improving because of that. You know, like I've got a defensive plan and offensive plan. I stick to it no matter what. Sometimes I don't win, but I stick to the plan, you know. So
yeah, chess is really interesting because they found that the grandmasters aren't necessarily, I mean, they're all ridiculously bright people, but what works for them is pattern recognition, which is they see the way somebody's playing and they know how that's going to go. And that works well in jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is far more complex, I think, than chess, because you know there's only so many squares in chess.
True.
So jiu-jitsu, like a couple of mil either way, and jiu-jitsu is a completely different move.
True.
So I think more experience gives you more pattern recognition, and that allows you to be able to ignore a lot of the information that's coming in. But again, like if you're presenting at a specific event, so things to help you ignore a lot of stuff. If you get there early and have a look at the room, you can get accustomed to the noises and the sounds and the feel of the room. If you get to get as much information as you can from the person hosting it, so you know who's in the audience, get a handle on the questions. You can do there are some coping mechanisms, that there's some positive coping mechanisms you can use, and planning like that is one of them.
Brilliant, thank you.
We're nearly out of time. I don't know if we want to do another link, or I feel like there's still so much more that we could ask Conor, or we have him on another time.
We've just getting him back. Really I think that's good.
The surface, haven't we?
Yeah, I like the idea of him coming back every couple of months and sharing stuff. I think
repeat guest, because we haven't even discussed Anton, someone that you will know that Conor is very familiar with is Wim Hof. He went did you go to one of his workshops?
Yeah, I went to one of his workshops, and during the lockdown I've been doing sea swims, and mind you, during the winter it was in a wetsuit. But yeah, I'm on the back of the cold showers, which is not saying much because the water's only like 20 degrees. It's not cold at the moment. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Wim Hof.
Yeah, well, I think we should do another episode on breathing, because I got a lot of stuff about breathing as well. Like we've got a whole show to talk, and Kim's I've got a lot of background in that. So I reckon we do another show on breathing at some point in the year.
Well, Conor was the one who introduced me to Wim Hof, I think. Really? He started talking about him. And that's when I discovered and started the cold showers and all of that myself.
Yeah, myself. I met Ivan Rakitic. Remember Ive?
Yeah.
I was one of Pete's. I think he was Pete's first black belt. I think he's Hof seminar, and we were in the ice bath and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, wow. In fact, I did one of his holotropic breathing sessions that Wim Hof did for 45 minutes. Honestly, I was off my head.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I've heard mixed reports about that, but I'm not surprised. Yeah, I've heard. Yeah,
I was in Planet Zanussi. I was somewhere else.
For people like me who have a completely clean life, it's so good to know you can get off your face without drugs or alcohol. Let's do it again soon, guys. Let's do it again soon.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Conor. And hopefully we'll see you on the mat. Anton, enjoy Thailand.
Yeah, have a great time, Anton.
How nice is that with Conor?
Oh.
It's amazing.
Bastard.
Jealous.
All right.
See you guys. Take care. Bye.